The sky above Washington was calm that day, a crisp winter morning where nothing seemed out of place. Then, in an instant, it happened. A deafening explosion shattered the silence. The sky lit up as the Bombardier CRJ-700, moving at an immense speed, collided with a Black Hawk helicopter. Flames erupted, and debris rained down, plunging into the icy waters of the Potomac River. Shocked bystanders stared upward, their eyes wide with horror, capturing the chaos on their phones. The first news alerts hit within minutes. Breaking news: mid-air collision over Washington. Casualties feared. Reporters scrambled to get details. Helicopters from local news agencies hovered above the wreckage site. The Potomac's surface was a mess of burning debris, sending black smoke spiraling into the sky. Sirens screamed in the distance as emergency responders rushed to the scene. Inside the Washington Air Traffic Control Center, chaos erupted. Controllers barked orders into their headsets, their screens flashing red warnings. The flight path of the Bombardier CRJ-700 showed an anomaly, a deviation that no one had accounted for. What the hell happened? The supervisor demanded, staring at the blinking radar screen. It veered off course 5 minutes before impact, an air traffic controller responded, his voice tight with stress. We tried to contact the pilot, but nothing. The last recorded transmission from the plane was chilling. Tower, this is Flight 704, something's off. We see. Then, silence. The pilot never got to finish his sentence. At the White House, President Donald Trump was briefed within moments. He turned to his aides and spoke with conviction, this shouldn't have happened. No way. That helicopter, too high, way too high. We're going to get to the bottom of this. Minutes later, his Truth Social post went viral. The Black Hawk was flying too high. Over 200 feet. Not supposed to happen, folks. Why aren't they talking about this? The internet exploded. Conspiracies, theories, and accusations flooded social media. Was it pilot error? A failure in the air traffic control system? Or something far more sinister? Rescue teams reached the crash site quickly, but the frigid waters of the Potomac made recovery efforts nearly impossible. Divers reported almost zero visibility. The only thing they could see through the murky depths were the twisted remains of 2 aircraft, and no signs of survivors. The official casualty report confirmed the worst: 64 lives lost. Among them, 14 figure skaters returning from a national training camp. Names began to circulate: Eugenia Shishkova, Vadim Normov. The world of figure skating mourned. Families were shattered. By evening, news stations dissected every possible angle. Experts debated on air. This is beyond a tragedy, one analyst declared. There are unanswered questions here, and we need transparency. Meanwhile, behind closed doors, investigators found something that made their blood run cold. The plane's flight path had been altered, but not by the pilot. The morning after the disaster, a thick fog hung over Washington, mirroring the uncertainty gripping the nation. The crash site remained under tight security as rescue teams worked relentlessly. With each passing hour, the questions mounted, but answers remained elusive. At the National Transportation Safety Board, NTSB, headquarters, investigators convened in a dimly lit conference room. Satellite images, flight path data, and emergency transmissions filled the screens. The flight should not have been there, muttered Daniel Keating, lead investigator, pointing at the projected map. Bombardier CRJ-700 was on a direct approach, but suddenly veered. Why? Silence. A junior analyst hesitated before speaking. Sir, we have the last recorded conversation from the cockpit. Keating nodded. Play it. A static-laden recording crackled through the speakers. The pilot's voice was steady, but laced with unease. Tower, this is Flight 704, something's off. We see. Then, a sharp noise. A second voice, barely audible, whispered something chilling. Turn back. Then, silence. Gasps filled the room. The voice did not belong to any known crew member. Keating's pulse quickened. Isolate that segment. Enhance it. The distorted whisper played again. Turn back. Impossible. No unknown individuals were aboard. But the voice was real. Meanwhile, journalists at major news networks scrambled to break new details. An anonymous source leaked crucial information. The air traffic controller responsible for Flight 704's route had been handling dual operations due to a system outage. It's possible he missed a warning signal, speculated one aviation analyst live on air. That alone could have set the stage for disaster. But Keating wasn't convinced. Too many variables didn't add up. Why had the plane changed course? Why was the helicopter flying at an unusual altitude? And most disturbingly, who, or what, had whispered into the cockpit's recording? Later that evening, authorities confirmed recovery of the aircraft's black box. Experts prepared for analysis, knowing it could hold the key to unlocking the mystery. But before they could begin, something even more alarming surfaced. The official passenger manifest contained 64 names. But security footage from the boarding gate showed 65 people had entered the plane. The Potomac River was still, but the weight of what lay beneath its surface pressed heavily on the divers. The wreckage of the Bombardier CRJ-700 and the Black Hawk helicopter was a twisted graveyard of metal and shattered lives. The water was icy, reducing visibility to near zero, but the divers pushed forward, scanning for bodies and the aircraft's crucial components. Then, a voice. At first, it was dismissed as a trick of the currents, a fragment of distorted radio chatter. But when a second diver surfaced in a panic, gasping for air and shouting, the recovery team paid attention. "There's someone down there," he stammered. "I heard them." But that was impossible. There were no survivors. NTSB officials and military personnel overseeing the operation exchanged uneasy glances. The official report had already confirmed that all 64 passengers and 3 crew members perished on impact. There could be no voices. That night, the incident spread like wildfire through private communication channels. A leaked audio recording, allegedly from one of the divers' headsets, sent chills down the spine of everyone who listened. A whisper. A single, broken phrase distorted by the water. "Don't look it up." Within hours, the recording vanished from all forums where it had appeared. Search queries related to it were met with error messages. It was as if it had never existed. Meanwhile, the official recovery team continued their work, reporting findings to the authorities. The Black Hawk's remains told a disturbing story. Its altitude before impact was significantly higher than standard military operating limits. But why? At NTSB headquarters, Keating studied the data from the black boxes. Flight 704's final moments were now clear, except for one detail. The altered flight path wasn't due to pilot error. Someone, or something, had interfered with the navigation system. And then there was the unknown extra passenger. No one could explain how security footage showed 65 people boarding, but only 64 names appeared on the manifest. Keating felt the hairs on his neck rise as he scrolled through the recovered security images. One frame showed a blurred figure near the plane's entrance, an individual who left no digital footprint, no recorded ID scan. A person who, according to all available data, didn't exist. Somewhere deep in the wreckage of the Potomac, the truth lay hidden. And as the divers would later recount in hushed voices, the whispers never stopped. Keating hadn't slept in over 24 hours. The black box data, the security footage, the divers' testimony, it all pointed to something that couldn't be rationalized. Yet, the official report still read, pilot error. He knew that wasn't true. Deep inside the NTSB headquarters, a restricted access lab housed the decrypted flight data. Keating and his lead analyst, Miriam Foster, pored over every second of Flight 704's final moments. The altered flight path should have been impossible. "This was no accident," Miriam muttered, her fingers flying over the keyboard. "Look at this, manual override." Keating leaned in. "Someone changed the course mid-flight?" Who? The pilot? Miriam shook her head. That's the problem. It wasn't triggered from inside the cockpit. The system was hacked from an external source. Keating exhaled sharply. That's not possible, unless... He didn't want to finish the thought. But Miriam did. Unless someone else was on board, controlling the system remotely. Someone who wasn't on the manifest. The unknown 65th passenger. At the crash site, the Potomac's currents had begun to shift, making recovery efforts harder. A second round of deep-sea scans was underway, and this time, something was different. "Sir, you need to see this," a Navy diver's voice crackled through the radio. The team had found something beneath the wreckage, an object wedged under the Black Hawk's remains. The diver's body cam transmitted shaky footage of what looked like an undamaged, perfectly square metal case. "Looks military," one of the supervisors murmured. "Get it topside now." Minutes later, the object was hauled onto a recovery boat. Markings on its surface were minimal, no serial numbers, no identifying insignia. But as the team prepared to open it, Keating received an urgent call. "Do not touch that case," a voice commanded. It was a government official, his tone sharp, urgent. "This is now a matter of national security." The line went dead. Keating's blood ran cold. Whatever was inside that case, someone high up wanted it kept secret. But why? Back at NTSB headquarters, Miriam had uncovered something even more alarming. The external override signal? It hadn't originated from a known device. It had come from the sky, above Flight 704's altitude. Keating sat back in his chair, his pulse pounding in his ears. "Miriam, are you saying this command came from another aircraft? Silence. Or something else entirely?" Keating stood in the dimly lit operations room, staring at the encrypted data Miriam had just decrypted. The transmission override that had altered Flight 704's course, it hadn't come from another aircraft. It had originated from something moving at impossible speeds, something that had appeared and vanished in the blink of an eye. "You're saying this wasn't a mechanical failure? Not a cyber attack?" Keating asked, his voice low. Miriam hesitated, then nodded. Whatever sent this signal, it wasn't man-made. The words hung heavy between them. Meanwhile, at the crash site, Navy divers had finally cracked open the metallic case retrieved from the wreckage. Inside was a single device, sleek, black, and featureless except for a blinking red indicator. The moment it was exposed to the air, every radio frequency within a 10-mile radius briefly cut out. "Jesus Christ," one of the technicians muttered, stepping back. Within minutes, a convoy of unmarked black SUVs arrived at the site. Men in dark suits, flashing government badges that no one could identify, seized the case without a word. The lead agent simply looked at the recovery team and said, "You never saw this." Back at NTSB headquarters, Keating was growing restless. The more he uncovered, the less he understood. Every call he made to official channels ended with the same response: "This investigation is closed." But he knew it wasn't. Someone was covering their tracks, burying the truth under layers of classified reports and redacted files. Late that night, Miriam called Keating, her voice shaking. "I found something else. A recording from a private satellite. It caught footage of something just before the collision." Keating's heart pounded. What did it see? Miriam took a shaky breath. A shadow. Moving faster than any known aircraft. It was there 1 second and gone the next. But just before it disappeared, she hesitated. It turned. Like it was looking at the plane. Like it was watching. Keating rubbed his temples. "Send me the footage." "I can't," Miriam whispered. "It's already gone. My system was wiped the second I accessed it." A chilling realization sank in. Someone, or something, wasn't just covering this up. It was still watching them. Keating had seen cover-ups before. He had witnessed powerful people erase evidence, rewrite narratives, and manipulate the truth. But this was something else. The evidence wasn't just disappearing, it was being erased in real time. Miriam's system had been wiped clean. The satellite footage she had glimpsed was gone. Even her access logs showed no trace of the file ever existing. They knew, she whispered over the phone. The moment I found it, they knew. Keating ran a hand over his face. Stay offline. Don't access anything for now. We need to be smart about this. But it was already too late. Within the hour, Miriam's apartment was raided. Her hard drives, phone, and every electronic device were confiscated by men in black suits. Neighbors saw nothing. The security cameras in her building wiped. It was as if she had never lived there. Keating tried calling, but her phone was disconnected. The silence was deafening. The next morning, an emergency press conference was held. A high-ranking official from the Department of Defense stepped up to the podium. After thorough investigation, we have determined that Flight 704's deviation was due to pilot error and adverse weather conditions. The Black Hawk was operating within authorized parameters. There is no evidence of foul play, cyber interference, or foreign involvement. Keating stared at the screen in disbelief. Lies. Every single word. He turned to his own files, only to find them scrambled. The recovered black box data, corrupted. Every trace of the mysterious override signal, gone. Even his notes had been replaced with blank documents. His phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. Stop digging. Or you're next. He gripped the device, his mind racing. There was one last hope, one last person who might have a copy of the data. An independent hacker known only as Spectre. Keating had never met him, only communicated through encrypted channels. But if anyone could retrieve what was lost, it was him. That night, in an abandoned parking garage, Keating waited. His breath came in short, uneasy bursts as he scanned the shadows. Then, a voice from behind him. Low, measured. You weren't followed? Keating turned. A hooded figure stepped into the dim light, laptop in hand. They wiped everything, Keating said. But you can get it back, can't you? Spectre smirked. They think they erased it. But nothing truly disappears. He opened the laptop, tapping a few keys. A moment later, a grainy, black and white video file loaded on the screen. Keating's stomach twisted into knots. It was the satellite footage. And it showed something impossible. Keating stared at the screen, his heart pounding. The satellite footage was grainy, distorted by static, but one thing was clear: just before Flight 704 deviated from its course, something massive had appeared above it. A dark, elongated shadow, moving unnaturally fast. What the hell is that? Keating whispered. Spectre adjusted a few settings, enhancing the video. The object had no distinct features, no wings, no lights, no identifiable markings. It hovered above the plane for less than 3 seconds before vanishing completely. This isn't an aircraft, Spectre muttered. It's something else. Keating exhaled sharply. Could this be some kind of classified military technology? An experimental drone? Spectre shook his head. If it was, they wouldn't be trying this hard to erase it. This is something they don't control. A chill ran down Keating's spine. The footage showed one more detail, one that hadn't been mentioned in any official reports. Just before impact, the cockpit's windshield flashed white for a fraction of a second, as if something had blinded the pilots at the last moment. That's why they lost control, Keating realized. They weren't just hacked, they were attacked. But by what? Before he could say another word, Spectre's laptop screen flickered. Lines of code began overwriting themselves. They found us, Spectre hissed, slamming the laptop shut. We need to go. Now. The parking garage filled with an eerie silence. Then, a sharp screech of tires. Headlights flared in the distance. Black SUVs. Run! Spectre shouted. Keating bolted toward the stairwell, his mind racing. If the footage was real, then the crash of Flight 704 wasn't just a tragic accident, it was an event someone was willing to kill to keep hidden. As they burst into the alleyway behind the garage, Keating's phone buzzed. A new message from an unknown number. "You've seen too much. This ends now." But for Keating, it was only the beginning. Keating and Spectre ran through the dimly lit alleyway, their breath heavy, their nerves on edge. Behind them, the roar of approaching SUVs grew louder. Whoever wanted them silenced wasn't wasting time. "We need to split up," Spectre gasped. "They can't track both of us at once." Keating hesitated for only a moment before nodding. "Where will you go?" "I have a safe house outside the city." "But you..." Spectre pulled a small, encrypted drive from his pocket and shoved it into Keating's hands. "This has a copy of the satellite footage. Make sure it gets out." Before Keating could respond, Spectre took off in the opposite direction, disappearing into the night. Keating turned and sprinted toward the nearest subway station. His mind raced. Who could he trust? The government had already buried the truth once. If he was going to reveal what really happened, he needed someone outside the system. As he reached the subway entrance, his phone vibrated again. Another message from an unknown number. "Your next move determines whether you live or die." He ignored it and kept running. 30 minutes later, Keating sat in the back corner of a nearly empty cafe, his laptop open. He plugged in the encrypted drive and held his breath. If Spectre was right, this was the only surviving copy of the footage. The file opened. The grainy satellite recording played again. The dark, elongated shadow. The blinding flash. The moment the aircraft lost control. But there was something new, something Keating hadn't noticed before. A transmission. Faint but unmistakable. A frequency buried within the static. Keating adjusted the audio settings, isolating the signal. Slowly, a voice emerged. Distorted, mechanical. "They are watching. They have always been watching." A chill ran down his spine. He had expected a cover-up, a military operation gone wrong. But this? This was something else entirely. Before he could react, the cafe's Wi-Fi cut out. His screen flickered. Someone, something, was trying to shut him down. His phone buzzed one last time. "This is your final warning." Keating exhaled slowly. He had come too far to stop now. He reached for his phone and made the call. "I have proof," he whispered. "But we don't have much time."